welcome or welcome back to Rise and Align, where we talk about all things high vibrational. We are your hosts. I am Demi.
And I am Halie. Today we are talking about Halloween. We're going to do a little Halloween episode in spirit of Halloween. I wanted to definitely dive into the concept of Samhain, which is the Celtic version of Halloween. It's more of an ancient festival, and it is a part of the Wheel of the Year. So it is a celebration between the fall equinox and the winter solstice. And I think that it is kind of important just to talk about because that is the roots of Halloween. That is where Halloween has stemmed from. And then, there's a lot of energetic correspondences to it and some fun rituals that you can do to celebrate Halloween or Samhain.
Yes. So Samhain is actually spelled Samhain. It is, like she said, a Celtic word, and that is where the origins of Halloween are known to have started. And during this time, they believed that the veil between the worlds of the dead and the alive was lifted during this time. And so they would light fires and wear masks to try to scare away the ghosts. And they would also tell fortunes during that time because it was actually, for them, November was going to be the new year. And so it was the ending of a year. And for some reason, they thought that they were able to predict fortunes and futures during that time as well. Mm-hmm. So they believed that the night before the new year, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. October, Samhain celebrated, and they believed that the ghosts of the dead returned to Earth. In Western Christian beliefs, they called November 1st All Saints' Day, and they believed that Halloween was the eve of All Saints' Day. In AD 43, the Roman Empire overtook the Celtic territory, and they created two different days during the fall. The first was Feralia. It was a day in late October that commemorated the passing of the dead. And the second day was to honor Pomona, the Roman goddess of fruit and trees. And an apple represents Pomona, so they believe that that's where apple bobbing during Halloween came from. I like that little fact. And then in the 8th century, Pope Gregory III designated November 1st as All Saints' Day, and they made it a time to honor all saints. And then they made the second All Souls' Day to honor the dead. So the Christian church wanted to kind of claim this holiday as their own.
Like all the other major holidays.
Yes. And kind of say that like they started it and make it more their own religion by celebrating saints. The 19th century is when Halloween first came to America, and it wasn't across America. It was only in certain areas due to like the religions that were practiced in each of the states. But that's when people first started holding like parties in their houses about it and telling ghost stories. And then trick-or-treating actually originated in Europe with people asking for food and money. And so they adopted it in the States in the 19th century.
And I think it's super important to note, and we'll probably talk about this over time, but all of our major holidays that are especially associated with Christianity nowadays stem from ancient practices, stem from pagan practices, and the ancient Celts and Christianity kind of took those and made them their own in order to, one, I think it was easier to encourage these people to convert to their religion, but also times of year are still very important, and a lot of times they symbolize certain things. So Samhain actually represents the final harvest and represents going into the latter half of the year, which is something that we still keep track of regardless of our religion. So, of course, Christianity wanted to kind of take over these ancient practices and make them their own, which then led to the modernization of them. But I really like to connect back to the roots of these ancient festivals and ancient practices, which Samhain is an ancient fire festival to the Celts. And there are some funny things that have kind of trickled into modern times, like we carve pumpkins, right? We have our jack-o'-lanterns for the pagan traditions or the Celtic traditions. That was done to, one, scare away the evil spirits that are entering into our world at this time because the veil is thinning, but also, two, the candle in the jack-o'-lantern is thought to bring light to the shadows or to provide protection from the darkness or the darker spirits that we're entering. So I think that's still a fun practice that we do today, is carving our pumpkins and lighting the candle in the pumpkin. And while I'm talking about this, I think that a fun little ritual or thing to do is when you're carving your pumpkin, you can carve something into it that has meaning to you. You can use it as maybe a tool for intention. So you carve something intentional into your pumpkin, and then every night when you light your candle, you are like charging that intention, reaffirming that intention, lighting that intention. So I think that is a fun little ritual that you can do because you're probably already carving a pumpkin. So I think it would be fun to add a little bit more intention to it, which is important because, as you had said, Samhain kind of marked a new year. So at this time, a lot of people think it's important to be setting intentions. So you can kind of use that as a way to set new intentions. You can also use the seeds from the pumpkin, and you can write intentions on your pumpkin seeds and plant them, or put them in a jar somewhere and use them for later for a spell jar or something too.
Love that. So as you were talking, there were a couple of things that came up. One, in Scotland, they still celebrate the fire festival in the fall, so I absolutely love that. And two was that whether or not you believe in ghosts or like afterlife or evil spirits or anything like that, I think probably the reason that they saw this as not only the end of the year when the harvest was over, but also the beginning of winter when seasonal depression all hits us. Like, that is negative energy. And I think that having a festival prior to that to try to combat that, to
fuel yourself up, energize you.
Yeah, so that we can, prepare for the long months of winter and, not be so kind of like sad and worried about it, but rather like ready for it, prepared for it.
So you can think about that from a introspective aspect as well, of like, what do you need to look at before we head into the dark month? Do you want to be stuck in your house with all of these negative things that you haven't unpacked or dealt with? Or do you want to dive into those, kind of know what you're dealing with, unpack, get comfortable, see your shadows, so that when you are in the depths of winter, you are not alarmed by what comes up. Like, you're kind of ready to face these things, and you have the time during winter to rest and reflect and to heal. So I think that Halloween or Samhain, you can use this time where the veils are thinning to maybe connect with your own inner demons, your own darkness. Allow that to come out and see what you're dealing with, and maybe release some of that before you get tucked in for winter.
Head into those winter months. Burn them away too, like, I love that it's a fire festival because we often talk about burning away the things that are no longer serving us, that we want to rid ourselves of, the concepts and the beliefs and all of that energy.
I just imagine like a bunch of people dancing around a fire. So I think, if you're dancing, we've talked a lot about how you store energy in your body. You don't even have to know what that is. You can do things to help release that. And I think dancing and moving your body can help release some of that too.
Definitely. I love that. Also, that's why Halloween isn't mentioned in the Bible, because it wasn't a Christian holiday. I don't even think that All Saints is, because it wasn't even a day until the 8th century when Pope Gregory III came up with it. Also, there are a couple other things that I thought were interesting that I've heard in the past that I wanted to talk about. So, black cats are like a huge symbol of Halloween, and some people say they're bad luck, some people say they're good luck. Where did that come from, right? So, actually, in the 13th century, the Catholic Church first started linking black cats to Satan and also to witches. The reason that witches kept black cats around was actually because they were super efficient in getting rid of the rats and the mice that carried the plague. And so they would protect them. Witches were, one with nature and were very practical and understood that. But because the Catholic Church wanted to link them to Satan, they basically were just making reasons for people to hate witches. And here's why. So the early Christian church in Europe saw witches as their direct competition because they were gaining the hearts and minds of so many of the people. They began hunting witches during the same time. Witches honored the natural world and had deep respect for plants and animals. Therefore, affection between humans and animals was seen as diabolical or devilish. So, if you've ever had a cat, you know that they're not like dogs. You have to respect them. Some of them come when they're called, but they're not very, you can't train them the way that you can with dogs. They're more like wild animals where you have to feel their energy and reciprocate that in order for them to respect and love you, which you really genuinely have to win over cats, and you can't overpower them. You have to attract them. So cats, like women accused of witchcraft, tend to exhibit a healthy disrespect of authority. The church wouldn't tolerate independent women or independent animals, so they made black cats out to be evil and related to Satan. So as I said, witches would keep the cats around to kill rats so that they didn't get the plague. And then they actually started killing cats because they were connected to Satan, thinking that they were evil. And then the plague spread even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's just another representation of how organized religion wants to take away your power, because then they can control you. And they wanted to take away some of that control that people were holding over themselves, because they couldn't be controlled by another. But I do find that interesting, that concept of having black cats around, because black is a color for protection as well. And so I feel like having a black cat around symbolizes protection. And we've talked a lot about colors and how black absorbs. So the cat can kind of represent absorbing negative energy around you as well. It's the same with crystals and stuff.
The other part of that is that the church actually convinced people that if a black cat was to cross their path, that it was bad luck, and that a witch had actually sent their familiar, the cat, to put a curse on them. So if they went to the church and they paid money to a priest to bless them, they'd be able to rid themselves of the curse that was put on them by the witch's familiar. So the church made a ton of money by blessing people to get rid of their curses.
The church are genius marketers is all that they are. Yeah. They are just spinning things into their favor, and they're like marketing schemes.
Yeah, it's funny looking back, but back then they were literally killing people over this. It was crazy. But interestingly, so as I said, in Scotland, which is where Celtics originated, was in the UK, they still celebrate the Fire Festival. In Scotland, they believe that black cats represent prosperity, and these beliefs are held in Japan as well, and they come from ancient Egypt, where people worshipped cats. So that's interesting.
And this brings me to say, do you have this belief that you're carrying that black cats are bad luck, and why? Maybe dive in. Why do you believe that? And then if you don't know why, maybe you can reframe that and have a new perspective on things, because I think we do have a lot of random beliefs that we've just carried down, that we don't know why we believe that. It's just something we've been told. And so that is just one little thing that you can do to like reframe your mindset, you know, start thinking like, why do you think that? Oh, because my mom said that, and her mom told her that, and her mom told her that. But does it actually have any meaning to you? Why do you feel that way? And something so simple of like having a black cat cross your path, people still believe this to this day.
Yeah.
Having that be bad luck. So you're affirming to yourself bad luck instead of being like, wow, abundance, like using that as a tool for affirmation. You are using that as a tool to affirm negative things.
I love to ask myself, is this belief serving me? Like, is this helping me in any way? Why am I holding this belief? And just like you said, you're affirming negativity. So if you truly believe that black cats bring you bad luck, or, you know, any other superstition like breaking a mirror is going to be 7 years of bad luck, or whatever you might believe, like, is that belief serving you? Do you actually want to hold that belief? If you do choose to hold that belief, it will create the emotion. You will worry, oh no, now I have bad luck. And you will act out of that emotion. You will create that reality for yourself. So if you choose to change your perspective and say black cats are good luck, then you're going to create that reality. So, I mean, I always ask myself, like, is this belief helping me? Is it serving me? Why am I holding it? Where did it come from? And like, do I want to continue to believe that?
Right.
I had a black cat for 20 years. He was the best cat in the whole world. I love that cat so much. And so I've always thought they were good luck, and they've always been wonderful to me. Oh, another thing that I was looking into, and this was from the History Channel, actually, they had a whole bunch of articles about Halloween, like where it originated and where our beliefs come from. So this one is the witch's hat. Where did the pointy hat come from? It came from Quakers. And the reason that they associated it with witches is because Quakers had really radical beliefs as opposed to Christianity. They believed that women were equals and that they were permitted to be preachers. And that was too much for the Christian church to accept. So they wore those tall black hats. They weren't pointy at the top, but they were tall black hats. And I think that that's where the concept of witches wearing black hats originated from. And the second part of this is that Jews wore really similar hats back then. I guess there are a bunch of like pictures proving that from that time period, that Jews would wear those similar hats. And they actually joined the Quakers in a lot of beliefs. So they were both accused of witchcraft because they were a threat to Christianity. So that is also, turns out, where the concept that witches have big noses come from, is actually that the Jews were wearing those black hats and that they were opposing Christianity and threatening Christianity. So if you had a big nose and you wore a black hat, you were obviously a witch and should be damned to hell. Duh. So I was like, wow, that's wow. Okay. So that's where those concepts came from. I just thought that'd be fun to talk about during Halloween. The last part that I found in this article was the wrinkly skin. Like when we see witches depicted, especially in older movies, they have like warts and wrinkly skin and crazy hair and black hats and big noses, right? So they say that the wrinkly skin was because older women were particularly vulnerable to demonic attacks. And so that's where like old cat women were diabolical and devilish, and obviously witches and evil.
Obviously.
Obviously. So
Of course.
That's where those concepts came from. Which, that's
very
fun.
interesting. Thanks for sharing. I also want to note, again, we are not a part of any sort of religion, but we're also not against specific religions, you know? But noting that certain religions have beliefs that stem from hateful things is not something that I personally want to be a part of, you know, and thinking about the origins of certain things and just how people have been treated over time, just being aware of what you're truly supporting when you are affiliating yourself with certain groups or religions.
Yeah, well said. I personally, I do believe in God. I believe a lot of the things that the Bible preaches. I think that where the evil comes from is not the religion itself, but rather the people and the misled interpretation
Mm-hmm.
and the hunger for power and control.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is all about having control.
So, yeah, witches, from back in 4,000 years ago are known to have been living in tune with nature and healing and generally positive, loving, and logical. And the only reason that the concept that witches were an evil thing came to being was because they threatened the Christian religion.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I also just wanted to talk a little bit more of what Samhain can represent and how you can celebrate it. So, as we talked about, the barriers between the physical and the spiritual world are thin at this time. It can be a really good time to get in touch with ancestors, with people you may have recently lost that you're wanting to connect with, or even to call in a specific goddess or god or deity, whatever you're wanting to connect with. It's a good time to do that because the veils are thin. And I think it's a good time to connect with source. I don't think that it has to be connecting with evil spirits. I think that if the veil is thin, then it is thin to all. So if you're wanting to connect with your ancestors, this is a good time. A lot of people make an altar where they honor people who have passed or honor their ancestors, whether that be pictures or things that represent these people. And a lot of witches specifically, or people who celebrate Samhain, will set the table. They'll have a place made for their ancestors or someone that they have lost. They set the table and put a meal there for them, just as a symbol, an energy exchange for those people. And we can also give gratitude to our ancestors, and we don't even have to know who they are, but we can have gratitude for them. And they are the reason that we are here today. So I think that's really special. And along with that, it's a good time to practice tarot, because in the past they have practiced divination at this time to get insights for the new year. But it can also just be a good time to connect with, again, source or God or the divine. And then I think it's a good time to bake. Again, it's kind of like fall, where you're like honoring, celebrating the harvest, because it is the last harvest of the season. We're picking the very last of what's grown over the season. So, baking something fun and sharing that with your family. And sweets and ale, it's kind of like we eat candy for Halloween or we trick or treat. But I think that having like a nice dessert and celebrating with some cider or something is a lot happier, and honoring stuff that came from the earth.
Yes.
Not artificially made. And then again, you can reflect on the past year, what's working, what's not, what you want to let go of. And then if this aligns with you, you can set intentions, because it is kind of a release, but also, again, historically has been a time of like the witches' new year. It's also a good time to honor the cyclical nature of death and rebirth. This holiday, this celebration is connected a lot with death. And as we see that in nature all around us, the leaves are falling, things are decaying. We're starting to lose the luscious, gorgeous greenery and flowers around us. So it is a time to celebrate and honor death, and just remind ourselves that that is a part of life, the cyclical journey of everything, really. And then some specific rituals that I also like to incorporate at this time. I usually dress up as a witch or something like goddessy. I've never like dressed up as anything like super scary, which I think it's fun to do that too, because you are protecting yourself from, the evil spirits. If you're dressed up like one, they won't come to you. So if you want to feel protected from the negative spirits, you can do that. But a lot of witches find Halloween or Samhain to be a good time to be your true self because you're not necessarily judged for that. It's normal to walk around like a witch. So I always usually just kind of dress up like a witch, and then you can make a little spell jar. I saw this recipe for a protection based spell jar, and you can put pumpkin seeds in there, and maybe it's the pumpkin seeds that you wrote your intentions on. You can gather leaves, which can represent things that are no longer serving you. You can put in soil from the earth, which is like a grounding energy. It's also kind of that darker color that's going to provide protection. You can put any black crystals in there or any crystals that align with a specific intention, and then light a black candle or seal it with a black candle. I feel like that's a fun little thing that you can do. Something that we both do is walk around in cemeteries. I think that a lot of people have a negative connotation with that as well. Like you're conjuring the
hey, you're not supposed to tell people that.
Like, but it's like you're bringing life to the dead. You're bringing joy and happiness to a place that is so sorrow. And I think that that is really special. And you can also honor these people and remind, like, just have that like energetic exchange that they existed or they're there and they are energy, their energy somewhere else right now, but just having that like acknowledgement and bringing that life to the cemetery, I think is really magical and a fun way to look at it, where it's not like a bad thing to go walk around in a cemetery
or a scary thing. I think it can be really peaceful. I don't know why I've done this my entire life, but I think that Halloween and the concept of honoring the dead and celebrating the dead is very similar to that of the Day of the Dead in Spanish culture. And I think that that is a very healthy way to look at it.
Yeah. And I also like to collect little treasures on my nature walk. So any leaves, acorns, and literally anything that you can find in the woods or wherever you're walking, to put on your altar, to put in your spell jar, or to just use as decor. It's kind of fun to create decor from your home with stuff that you found outside. Dried flowers, dying flowers, you can dry those and use those as decor. And then just honoring the abundance that Earth is still providing for us before we hibernate.
Yes. The only thing that I didn't mention was I thought it was funny. I read that in Celtic history, women believed that on the night of Halloween, they could predict their future husbands. So not only would they go around like trying to tell each other's like future and like predict each other's future and fortunes, but they would also try to predict their future husband.
It's truly a fun, magical day, and you can take from this what you want, what resonates with you. But there are so many different ways that you can celebrate Halloween. It doesn't have to be trick-or-treating and scary movies, and it can be fun in addition to bringing in that magical element and honoring the ancestors, letting go of what no longer serving you, and incorporating the rituals that you already have. You're carving your pumpkins and baking whatever it is, incorporating your magical practices with the things that you're already doing. It's so easy and just allows you to live more intentionally and honor and become your inner witch. Invite her, let her come out and play. Halloween is such a good time to do that.
Yeah, it totally is. I love that. Well said. Well, shall we pull a card?
Let's do it.
Ooh, what is
Justice.
it? Ooh, sovereign. I love her.
Okay. So as always, we are going to end this episode with a tarot card. This is a great opportunity for you to reflect and maybe take out your journal or meditate and just see what comes up for you. So the Justice card represents inner guidance, finding balance, truth, karma, law, justice, honesty, and accountability. The Justice card depicts a beautiful and powerful witch. She holds a balancing scale and a sword. She uses her sword to cut through illusion and reveal the truth. Nothing can hide from her. Her hair is red, representing passion and purpose. The curtain behind her is purple, the color of wisdom. When justice makes her appearance in a reading, she usually advises you to seek balance and fairness, and to weigh all pros and cons before making a big decision or taking action. Justice is known as the karma card, meaning you are reaping what you have sown. Justice is also associated with all legal matters. She hints that everything will work out in your favor as long as you are being truthful, honest, and fair. Justice serves as a reminder to always act with integrity and take responsibility for your actions. The reverse meaning suggests that it can indicate an unfairness, a holdback, or an unwillingness to accept the consequences of you or someone else's actions. You must look into the future and move away from any unfair circumstances. What can you do today to bring the tip of scales back to balance? Turn to your inner self for guidance.
That hit. That was perfect. Hopefully it did for you guys too. As always, thank you so much for being here. We hope you had fun with this episode. We did. And happy Halloween.
Have the most magical Halloween. Let your inner witch out. We love you guys. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.